Thank you, everyone, for joining me. My name is Corey Weathers. I happen to be on the developer evangelism team at Twilio, and we are going to have some fun conversations today about Twilio.net and some form of saving the world. And we'll get into what that means later on, which actually segues really nicely into this question. I have no idea why you guys are here. Like, this is my first time at Silicon Valley Code Camp, and so I'm super interested and super passionate and really want to understand. So I'm going to ask you guys to just shout out some reasons why you're here today. Any guys have any answers or any takers?
I brought coffee.
Okay, so we've got to thank the coffee guy in the back.
But there's no more coffee now, so.
Okay, so do not thank the coffee man in the back. Any other answers?
I like it because it's such a broad range of topics. Most conferences are very specific about a particular aspect of development.
Yeah.
See,
See, that's super cool to hear. And I'm going to say this back so that the camera catches this, which is there's a nice, really diverse set of topics that folks can come, listen to, learn from experts on. I myself, I don't consider myself an expert. I consider myself a developer. And what that means to me is I write a bunch of code and get it wrong half of the time. We're going to write some code today as well, and I'm going to get hopefully none of it wrong. But if I do, you guys will keep me honest. And we're going to do it in C#. I'm super curious to hear one more answer.
and so I look at this like going out to eat at a tapas bar where you get many small different samples of different food to stay current on what's going on and get out of your normal day-to-day funnel.
Oh, I love that. It's like being at a tapas bar. I almost kind of feel like, so we had the music in here earlier. It felt like Las Vegas. I probably should have had like a buffet in the back of some more food options and people would get in here and have some fun. No, I'm glad to hear that, and hopefully this talk helps to kind of fulfill some of what you guys are looking for. Me personally, when I got invited to come, a lot of what I was thinking about was, well, what do I talk about? Because the reality is, it's my first time here, and I have no idea what people are interested in. And so I'm just going to talk about me today, literally. I'm going to share some stories about how I've used Twilio. I'm going to share some stories around how other people have used Twilio. And I'm going to hope that it leaves you not necessarily feeling like, oh my God, this is like way too much. More specifically, feeling inspired to say, I wonder what I could do with Twilio. So with that in mind, I got to put the caution flag up. I've been told by our event organizers that I've got to set the ground rules pretty early on. And so one of the ground rules is no Q&A until the end. Clearly, I just broke that rule. So here's what that means. You guys can ask one or two questions in between a talk. But if I feel like it's going in a direction, I may cut it off to continue with the talk. All right? Another one of those ground rules is we're going to do a lot of stuff with some third-party APIs. I'm going to hide some stuff, and I'm going to call it the magic of coding. And I think developers in the room will understand there's some stuff that's just ugly and dirty to look at, and so we'll kind of gloss over it a little bit. But the intention is really to get you focused on the possibilities and how simple and seamless this is. Does that all make sense? Cool. Okay, now, I'm going to ask you for more audience participation. So, quick round of applause for everyone who's heard of Twilio. Now, let's keep that round of applause going if you have ever used Twilio. Oh, look at that. It's like paltry. Jesus. And then another round of applause if you've ever seen one of the people like me doing a Twilio demo before. Good, exactly. That's what I was hoping for. So the way that I like to talk about Twilio, and really you guys we've just talked about the why, but now let's talk about the what. So what is Twilio? Twilio is a cloud communications platform. Now what does that mean? People hear that and they're like, okay, that means nothing to me. So what does that really mean? We build a set of APIs that allow you to build communications into your application. It's that simple. If you decide that you need to do telephone calls, text messaging, a chat interface, something that looks like video calling, even want to do faxing of different documents, you can use our API for that. In addition to that, you can also use us for security scenarios. So things like two-factor authentication, things like how do I make a code available but not actually use an SMS product, an SMS-based product for that. because we've learned now that that's insecure per some security expert somewhere, right? And so the shortest form of this is, well, now that you know what it is, how does it work? It all starts with a Twilio phone number. You'll purchase a number. That number will be configured to connect up to your application. Anytime someone interacts with that number, it will hit your application. Twilio expects some XML to get back to it. That XML is called TWIML. Once Twilio parses that, everything works. Now, I just spent a lot of time talking, and you guys have this glossed over look on your faces. So anytime you see one of these, that means it's time to actually do some live coding. It's demo time. Let's jump out of PowerPoint, and let's get over to the Twilio console. And I have set up this interesting telephone number. By the way, let me take a step back. It's demo time. That also means it's time for you guys to actually use your phones for me as opposed to for your own personal purposes. So I'm going to ask you to do some texting and some calling in your chairs, and that's okay if you don't. But it'd be cooler if you did. So remember I just said, hey, we've got a Twilio phone number. That's how it all starts. You configure that number to connect up to your application. And that application has to return back some XML. Well, this is what the Twilio console looks like. So when you log into Twilio and you've already purchased a telephone number, this is the screen that you'll see, which will allow you to configure that number for incoming voice calls or incoming messages. And these are the demo accounts, blah, 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 ray, no one cares about that. Let's actually configure this thing to return a message back, because I want to show you guys how simple and easy this is. And I almost wish I had a clock, but that's okay. We won't time it for today. So I'm going to create this thing called a TWIML bin. What that TWIML bin is the XML that we really care about. Hey, look, it's my recently searched list. SVCC demo TWIML. And what I want to put in this TWIML bin is the XML that I want to for Twilio to use whenever it gets a message. Meaning someone texts this number, Twilio will connect up to this TWIML bin, parse it, and reply back. And what I want this to say, since this is XML, let's do some opening and closing tags. Thanks for watching this at SVCC. I'm not giving away cars, but you should still participate. Now I'm going to create this, and you see this interesting thing where it says like valid messaging TWIML, so you know that your XML is properly configured. I'm going to create this, and I'm going to save it. And for the purposes of this demo, I'm going to ask you guys to text this number right here, and I'm going to zoom in really big. See that phone number right there? Go ahead and text that. And while you do that, I'm going to do the same on my phone, because I want to make sure that this works. So, 415-663-2731. Hello. And I just got a message back, and it says, thank you for watching at SVCC. Now, you guys let me know when you get messages back. Hey, turn your ringers up. It'd actually be more fun that way. Hey, I heard that. Woohoo! That is perfect. That's how simple and easy it is to actually do this. I bought a telephone number. I didn't do anything but change that one line. I saved it and now configured it. That's magical to me, right? So now let me zoom back out, because what I said is we're going to do this using .NET, right? That's what the title says. So let's actually go use some .NET to make this thing work. So I'm going to jump over into Visual Studio Code, and what I have set up here, just for the purposes of everyone here in the room, is literally just a web API project. It's empty. The only things that I've added to it are the Twilio NuGet package, which is right there, and .NET Watcher, because it'll be fun to do some .NET Watch stuff today while I do this demo. But that's about it. I created a new controller, and I added these two statements. And you'll see why in a little bit. But now I've got this GET request. I'm actually going to change this to a post. And I'll tell you why very shortly. And I don't have to rename this, but let's just do that anyway. And what we're going to do is now reply back with a different message. And that message is going to say, hey, look at me from C#. and then I'm just going to return it. And that's it. Now, I'm going to use .NET Watch Run so that we can play around, test some things, and see what happens. And when I use .NET Watch, all it does is just make sure that as I make changes, let's save it, let's recompile, let's rerun. So .NET Watch Run will rerun as we make some interesting changes here. I'm also running something behind the scenes called ngrok. Ngrok is one of the most amazing tools I've ever seen in that it will expose your local host to the internet. Why is that important? So when we go back to Twilio and we change this to be a webhook, and this webhook connects up to my application, I need to give it a URL. And so this URL is going to be API, corey.ngrok.io/API/message. Now let's save this. And let's text the number again. Texting for the second time. And I just got a reply back. Now the cool thing is with ngrok, I can also see the response, the request come in to my machine because it's running locally off my machine. That's actually pretty fascinating. And hopefully for some of you other guys who've gotten some of these responses back, it says, hey, look at me from C#, which is actually pretty cool, right? You can do a bunch of other things as well, but I want to step back into the code here and show you something. I literally did that with 3 lines of code. We've got a telephone number, we've configured that number, we've done some processing on it, and we've returned with 3 lines of code. That's the magic of Twilio, all right? So let me shut this down really quickly, because you guys have seen that. You're probably like, all right, well, what does this mean? We did demo time, and demo time was fun, and how do we take this to the next step? And so the big thing that I always think about is you see this and you start to think, well, what's next? How do we actually use this? Now, the title was, how do we use Twilio and .NET to save the world? And remember I told you we're going to talk a little bit about me, all right? So I'm going to tell you a couple of use cases of how I've used Twilio in my personal life. And all of these are verifiable. Some of these, there's some information that we've changed for the purposes of identities. But the reality is, this is how Twilio's made a difference to me, and I'm totally interested in seeing how it inspires you guys. So let me give you a little bit of background. That's my son. That's Cameron. Cameron's 8 months old, which means Cameron was born in January. Cameron being 8 months old, Cameron was born at the same time that I joined Twilio. So I joined Twilio on January 10th. Cameron was born January 24th. I went on paternity leave sometime shortly thereafter and didn't go back to Twilio until March. Now, generally, when you see Twilio out at events, Twilio, we've got this interesting track jacket that we wear. It's got the Twilio logo on it. I don't have it on today because it's pretty hot outside, but it's got this logo on it. And you're like, oh yeah, I know you. I can spot a Twilio from anywhere. But the thing is, you don't just get those track jackets. You have to earn them. And how you earn them is by building an app and also being an employee. So I had an objective in mind, right, which is, okay, my son's born. I just joined Twilio. I'm out doing events. I got to get a track jacket. That's one. But then there's a second piece to this, which is, show of hands, any folks in here parents? Okay, a couple folks. One of the things that you really realize when you become a parent is that you do not have time for anything. And balancing, meaning trying to find time to get other things done, is very, very difficult. Now, I am a habitually bad texter. I'm not even going to lie about it. People text me, I don't respond back for like 3 weeks. When you have a child, and everyone hears about that, what's the first thing people think to do? Exactly. Hey, congratulations, send me some photos. Hey, congratulations, how's mom and dad? And the reality is I'm not responding to any of them. Let's just be honest. So this is exactly what happened. Cameron's my second child. I did the same thing with my first child because I was just that lazy. I'm just that bad at it. One thing was super interesting to me though, right? Which is I have this challenge behind the scenes. And the one thing that kept nagging at me was I got to find a way to solve this challenge. And in addition to that, remember I told you people keep texting and people keep asking for photos. One of those people who actually speaks a little bit louder than everyone else is my mother-in-law. I love her dearly. She's very honest about saying, you guys never send me pictures. I never see my grandkids. What is wrong with you? You're terrible parents. Okay. So I got two objectives now to solve. One is to get my mother-in-law off my back. And the second is to find a way to get this track jacket. Twilio can solve that problem for me. So here's what you guys see up here. As we get used to this parenting thing, we take a lot of photos. And right now, a lot of our photos, well, at the time, they were going up to OneDrive. Now they go up to Dropbox. And so one of the questions that I had in mind was, well, what if I could use Twilio to send out pictures to people? And that way, I wouldn't have to actually do this. Meaning, I just take pictures. And you text the number, and you get a photo. Don't ask me for the picture. You just get your photo however many times you want it. And so that's exactly what I built. Where the first thing we do is text that Twilio number. And then from there, it'll connect up to Dropbox. And then from Dropbox, it'll get a URL to a photo. And once it returns that URL to Twilio, Twilio will grab it and embed it in the message. So what we saw earlier today was an example of sending SMS, but not an MMS, which is a multimedia message. So now let's actually jump into some code. Let's see how this can actually work. So I've got a sample that's actually already up and out on the web. Here we go. Now this code is a little bit different. So I built a bunch of this code already. It's already out on GitHub, as is the blog post. And what this code does is it pretty much says, hey, let's set up that message, just as we did the last time, and let's return that. Except now I need a URL. Now how do I get that URL? Well, I need to get that from Dropbox. So I wrote a bunch of code to just connect up to Dropbox, do the authentication, grab a publicly accessible URL, and return that. All that code's right here. And then I got a backup URL in the event that it fails, because the internet is spotty. You know, these things happen. Wrote a helper, does my authentication for me so I can hide security tokens so you guys can't screenshot and next thing you know, connect up to my Dropbox account. All right. Grabs the files, every single file that's there, and just randomly selects one, and then returns that URL. And that way, if grandma wants to take 10 text messages at the same time on a single day, fine, you get 10 random photos, and hopefully they're random. So how do I connect that back up here? Well, I showed you guys message.body. We have this thing called message.media. And what that needs is a string. And that string is a URL. So let me actually grab the URL. And this looks really simple right now just because I've done some things to make this look simple, right? Reality is connecting up to Dropbox and other third-party APIs are really dependent upon those APIs. And I didn't want to spend time building that stuff here today. So if you guys are super interested in that, you can absolutely go find that on github.com. But what I want to do is show you this. I'm going to save that. And then we're going to go ahead and run that. I'm going to jump back over while this does what it needs to do to update our URL. Because we're going to use the same URL for almost everything today. Or the same telephone number for almost everything. So let me change that to a GET request. Let me save that. Hey, let's text that number. Let's see if people get back pictures. Now, you'll see the request coming in, and Twilio will take some time. It does what it needs to do. Come on back, Twilio. Come on back, Twilio. Because what's happening behind the scenes is it's going to get the pictures. It's downloading them to Twilio, and then it's going to reply back with that image. Come on. Don't fail me now. And what we're going to do is just make sure that nothing's broken. Okay, good. Okay, nothing. Not yet, at least. So let's go on back. Give me a photo. Give me a photo.
Is there a limit on the MMS you can send to Twilio?
there's not a limit, but there is, okay, let me actually say it differently. There is a size limit on the picture itself. But what Twilio will do is one of two things. If that happens, it will give you an error. And we should see that pop up in the console. We haven't seen that. I know MMS takes a little longer sometimes, right? The second is if, in fact, something goes wrong where it can't get the picture, then what it will do is store the picture for you and give you a link to the photo. And where that's super accessible is for scenarios where people don't have access to high-speed connections. But the thing that's super interesting here, as my demo goes badly off the rails, is we should get some messages here that says, hey, something's going wrong. And we're not getting anything that says something's going wrong. I think I have extremely bad cell service, too. But we see the messages here. And we see that things are going back to Twilio. So Twilio's having a hard time here doing some work. Ugh, it's a terrible demo. For the purposes of time, I got to keep going. So what I want to do is fix this and make sure you guys come stop by the booth so you can see it working after this talk. Say it again. You're not on the rails. Unfortunately not. But I got to tell you, I'm going to be dead honest with you. I wrote a blog post about this, and after I wrote the blog post, my mother-in-law said to me, I can't believe you used this in a blog post. Like, why would you tell the world about this? I can't believe you told the world about how much I nag you. What is wrong with you?
One mother-in-law doesn't nag her son-in-law.
That's right. We are not unique.
That-
The world is like us.
That is exactly right. The world is like us, and they appreciate us sharing our stories. Well, see, the thing about it was, when the blog post hit and people saw my son on the internet, the first thing they did was hit my wife and say, hey, your son's on the internet. And then she hit me and said, why didn't you tell me you were putting my son? Okay, so then things got really interesting. So my mother-in-law was actually the easier battle. My wife, not so much. But nevertheless, it made a really, really big difference. Because now, as someone who is already sleep-deprived and a habitually bad texter, well, Twilio's just automated my life for me. That's actually pretty cool. So I'm going to pivot to a different story around how Twilio is doing some things to impact people's lives. And you see, every time I kind of scratch this out and I kind of write in a new thing, because I think this is really the way we need to be thinking about this, is what else can we write in here? How can Twilio save families? So probably about 3 weeks ago, and for the purposes of the story, the names have been changed. I've gotten a text message from a very near and dear friend of mine whose name is Sarah. And Sarah says to me, you need to call Michael. It's an emergency. You need to call him now. Okay, so at that point, now I know. I told you I'm a habitually bad texter. I got to do something. I call Michael. Michael says to me, man, Sarah has found herself in an abusive relationship. Now, I'm going to stop right there. I've had to deal with situations like this in my past, but those were years ago. Now, as an adult, as a parent, I empathize in a very different way. And so my first thought is, whoa, how bad? My first question is, and then for the purposes of the camera, right? And at that point, he says, yeah, this dude has threatened to kill her. She went to work. She didn't respond to his text messages. He starts calling her phone. He shows up at the office when she doesn't pick up the phone. He tries to get his way into the doors. Eventually, he finds his way in. He's walking through the hallways looking for her because he's threatened to kill her. Now, all the signals are going off. Okay. So what are we doing? Michael says to me, it's actually been going on for some time. There were previous attacks. We'd gotten to the place where things had gotten so bad that every night she had to text me either red, yellow, or green to let me know that things were either safe, cautious, or really problematic. There's a bunch of things we did after the fact in the moment to get my good friend Sarah out of where she was and out of danger. Filing police reports, following up with security, dealing with things at the apartment complex because a lot of stuff had happened at the home where they shared. But the reality is, now as I've heard about this in this specific way, I'm starting to do research and starting to say, okay, well, what can I do to help? And I got to thinking about that red, yellow, green. And more specifically about the red. Generally, if things like that happen, yes, green is nice to know. Sure, yellow gives you cause for concern, but red really makes you get up and get to action. So one of the things I thought about as I was doing the research, let me share a story. One of the things I found was a lot of people have an emergency contact, specifically for this, saved under a different name. And my story on this was, well, what if we took that emergency contact and made it a Twilio number? And what if that Twilio number was configured to call out to 911? And what if at the same time it's configured to send a message to a loved one or an emergency contact that says, hey, something's going wrong, you need to be aware, get in contact, whatever that may be. And so I put it in this way because it's kind of the way I think about it, which is what's the path to calming down tensions and nerves and anxiety in that moment? And we talked a lot about messaging, and we just talked a lot about photo messaging. Now I want to show you guys telephone calls with Twilio. So, demo time. I'm going to jump back over into Visual Studio Code, and I think I've got a project set up for this. And this one I want to rename because we're doing some voice stuff here. And let me rename this controller so that we can update our URI correctly. And what I want to say here is, so you saw before whenever we did a messaging response, or whenever we want to do an SMS or an MMS, it was a messaging response. This one's going to be a voice response. And in that response, we can do a bunch of different things. What this response is going to do is dial. We clearly know we're going to be dialing 911. This response is going to send a message. So let's go ahead and do an SMS. And for the purposes of this demo, I'm just going to use my telephone number, which is already pretty much out there. And I'm going to go ahead and just get rid of everything else. And one of the things that I think is actually really interesting here is Twilio has the ability to record telephone calls. So if you decided that you needed to record something for the purposes of saving it, you can absolutely do that. It also has the ability to transcribe those calls. Now, why am I bringing that up? Because in a situation like this where things get really critical, you want to have records of everything wherever they are, even if your phone loses whatever it loses, right? So to do that would literally just be by saying, set that to true. Then, so now if I run this, I'm going to make sure something else is not running. So let's stop that. This is now configured on the same port. I'm going to go ahead and update our voice URL. And let me just make sure I get the verb correct. Let me go back over here. It's a HTTP post. So Corey.ngrok.io API voice. And I'm going to save that. And I'm fortunate enough in that I've got my phone actually connected up to this Bluetooth speaker. So I'm going to go ahead and just call that number. Now, I just ended that because I want to show you guys something, which is we're seeing this interesting debugger thing. I'll come back and tell you why that's happened. Get rid of all this stuff because blah, 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 ray. So I'm going to jump on to project my screen, and you see all these messages coming into my telephone. It says, hey, you need to help me. Hey, you need to help me, all right? But if you notice it, the call didn't go through. By default, in order to do a 911 call, you have to enable it with Twilio because we don't want to flood the emergency services system. So what I'm going to do is change it to a different telephone number that I've already purchased that will play back so that you guys can see what this really does sound like. And how I'm going to do that is by killing that. Oh gosh, this thing takes forever. So let's do that. Let's get rid of that. Let's come here. And I've got a telephone number that I've already purchased that's already configured for this. And I'm going to just copy that in there. And I want to make sure that I got the right format on this. So I'm going to say +1, get rid of that, get rid of that, and get rid of the space. Save that. Run that again. Make sure it's back up and running, and then we're going to make that call one more time. And I think reception is failing me badly. Oh, Jesus. Let me see what's happening here. Oh, I didn't configure that. Give me 1 second. So let's go change some things. That's set up. And let me come back in here. Come back in there. Voice, voice. Good to go. What's happened? Okay, now I'm running into an unexpected error. Jesus, my demos are going badly today. This is horrible. So this is the second one we're going to have to fix. But we're going to get this settled because I want you guys to see how powerful this is. Now, that being said, for purposes of time, I've got to keep going because I got 10 minutes left. I have to do this because it's the obligatory thing to do, which is if you guys know anyone who could use the assistance of the National Domestic Violence Hotline, which is available for specific scenarios like this that I just described, screenshot this number, text it out, tweet a friend, share it out. I didn't realize that this number was available when it was, but it's been super helpful to help kind of figure out what some next steps and preparation should be in the event that something like this happens again. So now we got one more thing. It's the last thing, which is how do we use Twilio and .NET to have some fun? And I like this video. This video, I think, captures. Does anyone know what this video is? Okay. So this is the video from the commercial of the very first iPod. Look at this guy. I mean, he is having a ball. And you can kind of see, right? Like, it's the old iPod, and it's got everything going on up there. I mean, look, he is having a ball. This is fantastic. Why am I playing this video? So you'll notice when you came in here, I had music playing. I'm big into high energy, high music, loud volume, everything that goes with that. And so I love this guy because he kind of captures my spirit on a day-to-day basis. Though I do not walk around my house doing that. Let's just be honest.
You have clothes on.
Well, and that too is a discussion that I think my wife and I generally keep to ourselves. But that's a great question. And so one of the things that, as I was preparing for this talk, I kept thinking to myself, music. How do I incorporate music into this talk? How do I get some more of that musical part of myself into this talk? Because you can use music to have a lot of fun. All right, and you guys see it here. There's a bunch of research that's just continuing to happen. I love that screenshot in the left where it's like code your face off. There's a playlist called Code Your Face Off. I have no idea if that even works. Like, I've never even used it whenever I code, so I'm like curious. And then this idea came to mind. You guys seen these posters all around the place? So I was talking to Peter Kellner, who's the event organizer. We're like, hey, what can we do to show off Twilio? How can we get Twilio to work in an effective way, really, and kind of show people how magical this is? And I was like, well, why don't we use music? Like, why don't you text in a song that you want to hear, and then we'll just play it over a loudspeaker. And he's like, I got one better for you. Let's find someone who can play some music. And then came James. Let me show you how this is actually built. And we're not going to build the code for this, but I am going to show you kind of a walkthrough of how the code works, which is you text that number, it will queue it up so that it can get processed. Whatever your request was will get processed by a natural language processor that I had to train and tune, and it sits up in the cloud somewhere. Once it figures out what the song is and who the artist is, it will return that so we can go get the metadata from Microsoft Groove's SDK. Now, Groove is going away, so at some point, this will easily be outdated, and I mean sometime in the next 6 months, which is terrible. But once we get that metadata, we return it back to Music by Twilio, which allows James to pick it up and see it on the big screen. So I don't know, show of hands, how many of you guys saw the big screen? Yeah. Yeah. So we got to get more people using the big screen, clearly. But the intention behind that is really to show people how easy and magical it is to embed Twilio into other scenarios that include a large number of other APIs. And so it's our final demo time. So for the purposes of this demo, what I'm going to do is actually just run the code that's actually deployed out in the cloud right now, because all this is using Azure Functions. And we're going to do some fun things where we're going to text. I'm going to show you how we mimic the text locally, how it goes off and hits the NLP and does the natural language processing, how that comes back and hits some stuff in the queue, and things get really interesting. Is that cool? Okay, final demo. So let's start here. I'm using Visual Studio for this, because Visual Studio just released their new Azure Functions tool set, which I have mixed opinions about, but generally positive. And so how I'm going to invoke this is I'm going to wait for this to finish, and I'm going to hit the URL with Postman. Show of hands, how many of you guys know what Postman is? Okay, so for the rest of the folks in the room, Postman is a way to send HTTP requests. If you need to just build an HTTP request and you want to fire it off and test your REST API, you can absolutely do that. So what I want to do is now hit this with a specific request. And I keep using Look What You Made Me Do by Taylor Swift, which is really the thing that we care about, because God, who doesn't love Taylor Swift? What's wrong with you people? All right? So I want to show you the functions are running. And remember I told you it kind of queues the request. So I have 3 queues sitting in the background. The first is the request queue. The request queue has nothing inside of it. Thank God, nothing should be in there. The second is the parsed queue, which kind of says, hey, once we get the data back from the NLP, stick it in here. And then the last one is the resolved queue, which says, okay, well, now we got a bunch of stuff back. We need to go play some songs. And this is what that message looks like. So let me use Postman to hit our function. And I've got a breakpoint in place so you can see, okay, we actually are hitting my code. And I'm going to go ahead and just run this all the way through. So let that run. And what you should see now is one message in a request queue. Then I have a trigger sitting on this queue, right? So this came from a fake text message. But I have a trigger sitting on this queue. And what you'll see is, at some point, Azure's going to realize, hey, this queue has a trigger. We need to do something. And when that happens, it's going to hit my queue code that's sitting up in an Azure function as well. And I'm waiting to come on and pick it up. Pick it up. There we go. And now it's hit my queue trigger. And what this does is, like I said, it goes out and it hits our natural language processing service. And this natural language processing service is just sitting at a URL in the cloud. But I've had to train and tune it and get it configured, right? So now once I get that result back, it will tell us, hey, either something went good or something went bad. Here, something went bad. So I'm almost kind of thinking, hey, I got some internet stuff going on here. But the good thing is it keeps going. So what I'm going to see here in the queue now, when I hit parsed, is either a message or no message, one of the two. If something fails, then I won't log it because we know that something's failed and it will send me an email. The difficulty is, it's gone through and already processed that request. So now when I come in here and I look at the resolved queue, I'm going to click on the last one, Oh no, that's a different one. Jesus. What's happened? It's not gotten in the queue. So let me see what's gone wrong. Oh, look at that. So it said the natural language processor was unable to determine the song. That's good to know. It will probably have sent me that in an email. I want to use a different song because I really want this demo to work since my other 2 demos crashed and burned. So let me come up here and let me type virtual insanity. And we're going to go ahead and send that. And this is all stuff that Twilio would normally send if it were doing a request. But I've just taken it and just copied and pasted it here, so that way it's super easy. What should have happened is this should have now hit my breakpoint. And it didn't yet, so why not? Oh, there we go. So it's hit my breakpoint. We'll skip right on by that. We'll skip right on by that. Skip right on by that. Oh, and the same things happen. Okay, so my 3rd demo was crashed and burned. I have no idea what the hell's going on. I promise you. And the thing is, everything's been working to this date. So I'm going to say, trust me, it works, which is the magical response, right? Because we clearly had some stuff in the queue here that's just been waiting for James to pick it up to play for tomorrow. Let me see. Yeah, I don't know what's happened here that we can't get out to the natural language processor.
I saw it work out.
And it's still here. We've still got 5 songs in here.
I just got a response that my request was successfully queued.
Right. So this is what's kind of weird about it. I have no idea why things are breaking now, but it's probably because I'm on the big stage and things are like, so how am I going to recover this? What I'm going to say to you is, we've got this thing working. It will be actually back up tomorrow because it worked today and we just didn't get a lot of participants. So we need you guys to participate. Keep participating. Text that number, and that number is, and it's still up. It's still configured. I haven't changed it.
We can send that now.
You can absolutely send it now. And well, hopefully it will work because I just hit live running code and it didn't work. But text that number and drop your request into the queue, and they will be up there on the big screen tomorrow. And text it with any song, any artist you can think of. And so with that, now I'm going to jump to the end, which is, you could have been anywhere in the world. You've been hanging with me for the last 45 minutes. I really appreciate that. So thank you. If you guys have questions, feel free to come find me at the table. This is my contact information. You can easily tweet about how my demos crashed and burned. You can easily email me about how I did this one thing wrong in the demo. I love all the feedback. I don't take it personally, but I'm super curious to just keep learning. And I hope you all walk out of the room feeling a little bit more inspired and a lot bit more anxious about the fact that I'm going to fix these demos, damn it. And with that, thank you. Okay, so you guys have any questions?
So what is some of the most recent functionality that's been added into the Twilio platform?
Oh, so I want to show you something, but I can't do it with the camera on. I'm going to do it anyway. I'm going to ask Kenny to take it out. So we just launched a product that I think is really, really cool. And this product is something that we call Twilio Studio. And what it does is it takes the code out of, let me turn that down. It takes the code out of Twilio. So everything you saw me do today, you pretty much saw code, right? And I think that's everything. What this does is it makes it drag and drop. So I'm going to show you this. Nope, not there. I think it's like flows. No, not there. Dang it. This thing is so super secretive, we haven't even exposed it to the console. Like, that's how crazy this is. Let's use this. And let's use that. studio flow. Select the flow. Oh, yeah. Let me save that. But I can't change the flow. Dang it. What is the flow URL? Oh, it's not going to take me there. That's how secretive this is. Look at this. Okay, so I'm going to take you to twilio.com/studio. What it allows you to do is everything that we've been thinking to do turns it into a drag and drop interface. So that way you no longer have to write the code. So you purchase that number, and it says, hey, if there's an incoming event, so like right here, it says like incoming message or incoming call, do this thing. And this thing says, hey, send an appointment message back out. And then you get some options for, hey, do you want to reply if someone replies back? Do you want to just let it drop off? Or if something fails, how do you want to respond? We have the same thing for telephone calls. If someone makes a phone call and you want to be able to do something, well, now that the call's been answered, make an outbound dial. And then from there, let it say this particular message. Why I think Twilio Studio is really powerful is because Twilio Studio takes the concept of Twilio out of the developer and into the folks who have to maintain things, right? So as opposed to us having to think about this notion that, well, in order to get things working, developers have to write the code, it's, well, what if we had a flow and we just go and make some changes to our drag and drop interface? That makes things really, really, really interesting. The second thing that we launched is the global phone number catalog. Now, what that is a lot of people use Twilio phone numbers for messaging services, and we have it round robin through a number of different telephone calls. And so to do that, what we do is we allow you to purchase numbers from our catalog, but finding that previously was really difficult. And so as of last Monday, we finally were able to make that something that's easy to do within your code, where you search for a number, you purchase that number, and then you add it right into your services. And it can be global. It doesn't have to be just US-based. Cool. Any other questions? I know we're getting kicked out. Okay, good. So if you guys do have questions, come find me at the Twilio table. Thank you again.